XRP community gets, it's almost $100 billion of XRP floating around that's yield free.
Charles Hoskinson, founder of Cardano ADA and one of the original minds behind Ethereum, just made comments that have the XRP community buzzing again. And depending on how you interpret them, what he said could mean one of two things. Either he knows something coming, or he's hinting at a truth the rest of the world isn't ready to accept yet. Now, before we dive into the chaos, let's rewind for context. Charles and the XRP community have had a rocky history. For years, there's been tension, debates about centralization, government influence, and whether XRP was unfairly targeted by the SEC compared to other coins. Hoskinson, known for his strong opinions, often clashed with XRP fans, calling out what he described as conspiracy thinking in their ranks. But this time, something's different, because instead of dismissing XRP outright, Charles's latest comments actually touched on systemic manipulation, insider relationships, and how certain cryptos may be positioned for regulatory approval while others get sidelined. Sound familiar? That's exactly what XRP holders have been saying for years. And suddenly, the man who used to mock that theory is echoing parts of it. During a recent livestream, Charles mentioned that the crypto space is heading into a phase where only networks with clear compliance pathways, financial institution support, and enterprise-grade use cases will survive. He didn't name XRP directly at first, but he didn't have to, because let's be honest, XRP has been positioning for that exact narrative since 2015. Its partnerships with RippleNet, its ISO 20022 compliance, its relationships with central banks and fintech corridors, that's been Ripple's playbook all along. And now, Hoskinson, the man who built Cardano as a purely decentralized alternative, is hinting that the winners of the next phase will be those integrated with regulation, not fighting it. That's the kind of statement that sends waves through the XRP community. Because it begs the question, was XRP never the enemy of decentralization? Or was it the blueprint for how decentralization and regulation merge in the real world? Let's break that down. When Hoskinson talks about survival in the next phase of crypto, he's pointing at something deeper than price action. He's talking about alignment with institutions, governments, and the financial backbone of the digital economy. And like it or not, XRP fits that profile more than almost any coin out there. It's ISO 20022 ready. It's already been battle-tested in court. And Ripple's tech stack is now being referenced by payment giants, central banks, and even IMF research groups. So when Hoskinson says, the age of Wild West crypto is over, XRP holders hear something entirely different. They hear, it's time for utility-driven coins like XRP. And that's what's got the community fired up. Because for years, XRP has been the underdog, dismissed by Ethereum maxis, mocked by Bitcoin purists, sidelined by regulators. But if the founder of Cardano is now acknowledging that institutional alignment might actually be the future of crypto, that's a massive narrative flip. It means XRP wasn't behind. It was early. Now let's get even more speculative, because this is where it gets spicy. There's growing chatter that Hoskinson's comments weren't random at all. Some analysts believe he's subtly preparing the ground for Cardano's own regulatory alignment, and in doing so, he's indirectly validating XRP's path. In other words, he's realizing that fighting the system doesn't change it, building with it does. And if that's true, it means XRP's compliance-first architecture could soon become the template for every serious blockchain that wants to survive the next decade. That's the kind of realization that changes everything. Because while most people are watching charts, the real game is happening behind closed doors at the IMF, the BIS, the G20, and private meetings between payment networks and blockchain executives. And if Hoskinson, one of the most respected developers in the space, is hinting at that shift, it's because he knows what's coming. We're talking about the global integration of blockchain into real-world finance, where settlement layers like XRP become the invisible infrastructure beneath the world's money flow. That's not conspiracy. That's the roadmap being drawn right now. So yes, maybe Charles and the XRP army haven't always agreed. But now, the line between Cardano's philosophy and Ripple's strategy is starting to blur, and that's no accident. Because both are now staring at the same future. A world where compliant decentralization, the perfect blend of freedom and structure, becomes the new standard. And if that's the case, XRP's years of being misunderstood might finally pay off in a way nobody saw coming. Because sometimes, being early looks like being wrong, until the world catches up. And right now, it feels like the world, and even Charles Hoskinson, is starting to catch up. Charles Hoskinson doesn't just talk. Every time he opens his mouth on livestream, he's signaling something. He's a mathematician, a strategist, and someone who knows how to shape narratives in crypto. So when he started talking about the next phase of blockchain being institutionally integrated, compliant, and enterprise-focused, you better believe he knew what kind of storm he was stirring, especially among XRP holders. Because that exact framework, institutional compliance, real-world integration, regulated settlement, has been Ripple's thesis since day one. So what's really going on here? It's not just about Cardano or XRP. It's about the inevitable convergence between decentralization and the global financial system, something every government, every major bank, and every blockchain founder knows is coming. Let's decode it. For the last decade, crypto has been a rebellion. Bitcoin was created as an act of protest. Ethereum followed, promising a world without middlemen. But now, the tone is changing. Governments are no longer trying to ban blockchain, they're trying to control it. Central banks are testing CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Payment giants like Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal are experimenting with on-chain settlement. Even the IMF and the World Bank are running digital currency pilots in partnership with private blockchain firms. And in the middle of all that institutional movement sits Ripple, the company behind XRP. That's not by accident. Ripple positioned itself as the bridge between crypto and the existing financial infrastructure. A translator layer that could speak both languages. Regulatory compliance and blockchain efficiency. And while some people mocked that approach as being too centralized, it's now starting to look like the only sustainable path forward. Which brings us back to Charles Hoskinson. When he said the next phase belongs to projects that can work within regulation, he was essentially confirming what XRP holders have been screaming for years, that real-world adoption requires trust, not rebellion. And that's exactly what XRP has been quietly building. Let's zoom out for a second. In the next 5 years, we're going to see something massive. The creation of a global interoperable financial stack. A hybrid system where traditional banking rails and blockchain settlement layers are fused together. That means when a bank sends cross-border payments, it won't be using SWIFT alone. It'll use blockchain protocols underneath, like XRP Ledger, to handle real-time liquidity, instant settlement, and on-demand currency conversion. And when Charles talked about enterprise-grade use cases, this is exactly what he was pointing to. Because the next big wave of crypto isn't about meme coins, NFTs, or speculative trading, it's about financial infrastructure. The invisible plumbing of the global economy. That's why Ripple has been working with the Bank of England, the National Bank of Georgia, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and the Federal Reserve's Faster Payments Task Force. And here's the part few people caught. When Hoskinson acknowledged that only blockchains with real-world integration will survive, he was indirectly validating XRP's positioning. Because that's the exact strategy Ripple built its empire on. So even if he didn't say XRP by name, everyone watching knew what he meant. Now, let's be honest, the Hoskinson XRP tension has been legendary in crypto circles. It's been years of back-and-forth comments, subtle jabs, and completely different visions for blockchain's future. Hoskinson built Cardano on the philosophy of purity. Fully decentralized, academically peer-reviewed, resistant to government capture. Ripple, on the other hand, took the opposite route, pragmatism. Work with regulators, not against them. Integrate with banks, not replace them. And here's the irony. Both might end up converging in the same place. Because what we're witnessing now isn't just the evolution of crypto, it's the institutionalization of blockchain itself. That's what Hoskinson was really talking about. He was saying, decentralization alone isn't enough anymore. To survive, a blockchain must integrate with the real economy. And that's where XRP has been sitting quietly for years, waiting for this exact moment, when the world finally catches up. Here's what's crazy. As Hoskinson was talking, behind the scenes, Ripple has been expanding aggressively. They just announced partnerships in Africa for real-time remittance networks. Their CBDC platform is being tested in multiple countries. And the company's tokenization and liquidity products are being adopted by institutions that never would have touched crypto 5 years ago. In other words, the infrastructure Hoskinson just described as the next phase of blockchain already exists, and XRP is powering it. That's why XRP holders are so alert right now. Because whether or not Hoskinson meant to praise XRP, his entire statement sounded like a subtle admission that the future belongs to utility-driven, regulator-friendly, enterprise-backed coins. And that means XRP is finally standing on the right side of history. When you strip away the drama, here's what Hoskinson's comments really mean. Crypto is growing up. Institutional integration is inevitable. Compliance will define survival. And the projects that already play in that arena, like XRP, are about to become the backbone of the new digital economy. That's the subtext. That's what the XRP community picked up instantly. Because they've known for years that XRP wasn't just a token. It's a framework. A digital bridge for value transfer that can sit between any currency, any network, any jurisdiction. Hoskinson might not love that idea, but he's starting to acknowledge it. And that acknowledgement, even indirectly, is the biggest validation XRP has gotten from a major blockchain founder in a long time. Because when your former critics start speaking your language, it's not coincidence. It's a sign that your vision was right all along. Here's the part most people still don't fully get. This moment, this conversation around Charles Hoskinson and XRP, it's bigger than any one coin or founder. It's about a turning point, a quiet transfer of power happening behind the scenes, where the ideals of crypto's past are colliding with the real-world adoption of the future. And right now, XRP is standing exactly where those two worlds meet. Let's unpack what that means for holders, and what it says about where the entire crypto market is heading. When a figure like Hoskinson starts echoing Ripple's long-term thesis, even indirectly, that's massive validation. Think about it. 4 years, XRP was seen as the banker's coin. The one crypto purists didn't want to touch because it wasn't fully decentralized or rebellious enough. But now, the same people who used to mock that strategy are quietly shifting their tone. Because they're starting to realize that regulation isn't the enemy of innovation. It's the gateway to real-world integration. That's what Ripple understood early on. And that's what the institutions are finally waking up to now. When you see governments testing CBDCs, banks running pilots with blockchain-based liquidity, and payment giants exploring cross-border settlement using on-chain technology, you're looking at a world Ripple already built infrastructure for. So for XRP holders, Hoskinson's comments were a signal, not of rivalry, but of recognition. Recognition that the tide has turned, and the projects that position themselves inside the system, not outside it, are about to lead the next era. Let's not sugarcoat it. Institutions move slowly, but once they commit, they never go back. Look at what's happening. Ripple's technology is already being tested by over 50 central banks. Their CBDC platform is being integrated into pilot programs across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The XRP ledger, XRPL, is evolving to handle real-world tokenization. Everything from real estate to carbon credits to stablecoins. That's not a maybe someday situation. That's a quiet, methodical rollout of global financial infrastructure. And the best part? Most retail investors are still distracted by meme coins and speculation. They're missing what's actually happening right under their noses. The largest shift of liquidity in digital history. That's why XRP holders are holding strong. Because they understand that when the floodgates open, it won't be hype-driven. It'll be institutional. It'll be official. And that's exactly what Hoskinson's recent tone confirmed. That blockchain's next frontier isn't about decentralized ideals alone. It's about utility, compliance, and real-world function. Let's be honest. Being an XRP holder hasn't been easy. Years of lawsuits, mockery, regulatory uncertainty, and FUD. But those who held through all of it, they didn't just survive. They gained perspective. Because while the rest of the market chased trends, XRP quietly built a foundation. That's why this moment feels different. For the first time in a long time, the world is starting to speak Ripple's language: liquidity, interoperability, real-time settlement, global reach. And when even longtime skeptics like Hoskinson start hinting that this is the direction blockchain must evolve toward, that's a massive shift in sentiment. It means XRP holders aren't on the fringe anymore. They're at the front line of the next phase of blockchain evolution, the institutional adoption era. So what happens next? We're entering a time when digital assets will no longer compete for hype. They'll compete for infrastructure relevance. Every coin, every chain, every founder will be judged by one question. Can you move money, data, or value efficiently in the real world? And that's where XRP's decade of quiet work will pay off. Because it's not a meme. It's not vaporware. It's the underlying plumbing of the new financial web, and that's exactly what Hoskinson's remarks indirectly acknowledged. So if you're an XRP holder, here's what you need to understand. The moment the industry's biggest voices start aligning with Ripple's original vision, even unintentionally, it's not just coincidence. It's confirmation. Confirmation that you were early. Confirmation that you were right to believe in real-world use cases when everyone else was focused on speculation. And confirmation that the next phase of crypto, the institutional adoption wave, is already unfolding. When Charles Hoskinson made those comments about the future belonging to blockchains that integrate with institutions and embrace compliance, most people brushed it off as another philosophical take. But XRP holders? You heard something different. You heard confirmation. Because that's the very DNA of Ripple's mission since 2012. Building a bridge, not a rebellion. And while others were arguing over decentralization purity tests, Ripple was out there signing partnerships with central banks, integrating with payment providers, and preparing for a world where blockchain doesn't fight the system, it powers it. So now, as this institutional shift becomes clearer every day, that early vision suddenly feels prophetic. It's like watching the world finally realize what you've known all along. XRP wasn't built for hype. It was built for legacy finance. For the rails that move trillions every day, not the tokens that move trends. Here's the biggest takeaway from everything happening right now. Crypto is evolving. The phase of memes, hype coins, and short-term mania is fading. What's emerging is a market driven by utility. And XRP's entire architecture, instant liquidity, near-zero transaction fees, interoperability, was designed for this exact phase. That's what Hoskinson's shift in tone really represents. The broader industry waking up to the fact that long-term survival requires purpose. It's not about how loud your community is. It's about how useful your protocol is. And that's why Ripple has kept building, quietly, consistently, strategically, while others were distracted. So if you're holding XRP right now, understand this, you're not betting on speculation anymore. You're holding a piece of infrastructure, one that might soon become an invisible backbone of the digital economy. Over the next few months, you're going to see headlines that confirm this shift. More partnerships, more pilot programs, more governments publicly exploring Ripple's technology for CBDCs and payment infrastructure. You'll also see other blockchain founders start echoing the same message, words that used to be controversial suddenly becoming common sense. And that's when everything changes. Because once the narrative flips, once the institutions move in, XRP stops being just another crypto and becomes the bridge asset the system depends on. That's when the world finally sees what XRP holders have been preparing for all along. So if you're listening to this right now, you've made it through years of waiting, doubt, and headlines trying to convince you that XRP was done. But guess what? The story was only on pause. Now it's back in motion with the same clarity Ripple had from day one and the same mission that's slowly becoming reality. Because the biggest institutions in the world aren't building on trends. They're building on trust. And that's exactly where XRP fits in. So no matter what you see in the short term, the price swings, the rumors, the speculation, remember this, the foundation is already laid. The partnerships are real. And the recognition, even from rivals like Hoskinson, is just the beginning of something far bigger. If this video hit you differently, if you felt that sense of finally they see it, then make sure you smash that like button so more XRP holders see this too. Drop a comment below and tell me this. When did you first realize XRP was built for the institutions, not the hype? Because trust me, your story might inspire someone else to hold a little longer, to look a little deeper. And if you want to stay ahead of this next phase, as institutional adoption accelerates and the truth about XRP unfolds, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because the next few months are going to be massive.